Welcome back. Despite 3 decades of democratic reform, many of South Africa's elite schools remain powerful bastions of historical privilege. While their demographics may have superficially changed, a system of sophisticated gatekeeping through financial barriers, culturally biased admission tests, exclusive language policies, and unspoken social codes continue to effectively exclude the majority. This perpetuates the de facto racial segregation, ensuring that these institutions remain engines of inequality rather than beacons of transformation. Dr. Samantha Krige from the Cape Peninsula University of Technology joins us now to tell us more. A very good evening to you, Dr. Krige. A fascinating study that you have conducted here. Tell us a little bit more about these sophisticated ways of quiet gatekeeping that we're seeing in our education system.
So what these elite schools often do is that they've got various policies that keep these gatekeeping, well, they keep the admissions policy, keep the schools predominantly white. And those policies are things like high school fees. It's something like ensuring they've got the zoning policy, ensuring that the admissions criteria, they've got language policies that they've got to keep. They also have a early lock-in, where they lock in the learners that they want much earlier than what grade R or grade one where that happens. And then they've got something like social selection as well. They are very, very choosy about the type of child and the type of parent that they want at their school. And all those together work to actually keep the school predominantly white, in a sense.
Have these schools, Dr. Krige, found a loophole within legislation, or are there ways to actually prohibit them from continuing with these kinds of practices?
So it's very difficult to prohibit them. You know, with the Education Department, the WCED, they've instituted a admissions portal. So from the outside looking in, you would think that they might have some control over it, but actually they don't. So it's a centralized admissions portal, but it still means that the schools can choose who gets in, and how they allow those people or the parents to get in. And so even though to the parent it might look like a fair and transparent exercise, it actually isn't. And
And
so I think that, yeah, go ahead.
sorry, you may continue, Dr. Krige.
Sorry, you
Finish
may
your
continue,
thoughts.
Dr. Krige. Finish your thoughts.
So I do think that, parents need to seriously look at what the schools, the demographics of the school looks like. If the SGB, if the teachers of the school are not diverse and does not represent what our country is, then there's a problem.
You know, Dr. Krige, you're mentioning layers that are used as well to kind of also implement this gatekeeping as well from, whether it be the income of the parents, whether it be the social status, whether it also be language policies as well. We've heard a lot when it comes to language policies, when it comes to the Bella Act. Will that in any way help in these kinds of situations?
I'm hoping so. The thing is that with the admissions policy and with the WCED kind of taking control over it, we all thought that that would make a change. It hasn't. That change hasn't clicked. So I'm hoping with the Bella policy that there is going to be a change. The big thing about the Bella policy, though, that I think is also valuable is that grade R would then become part of the school. What happens currently is that grade R is not part of the school. And so it gives the school, not part of the WCD, so it gives the school complete power to choose who they want in their school. It also gives them complete power to charge fees that they feel they want to. And very often they charge fees which are much higher so that they can actually see, okay, well, who can afford the fees? And so they charge fees that's so much higher. And in that way, they also disadvantage certain groups of people. And so by the time, as a parent, when you come in and we want to kind of apply in grade one, the spaces are already filled because the fact is they're going to take siblings into a school. They're going to take those from grade R because the natural trajectory is that they would go on to grade one. And so by the time other parents actually apply, there's no place.
You know, mentioning also taking siblings as well, part of your research found that, you know, the old boys club also dominates when it comes to this application process as well, because if your father or grandfather or anyone in your lineage happen to go to that school, you have a better chance. But if we're looking at the country's laws, for someone of color, your father and grandfather, the likelihood that they would have been at that school are literally impossible.
Spot on. And so lots of schools are aware of this. So in their policies, and when we actually looked at the documents, they would take out that little line that would ask, was your father an old boy? Do you have a heritage, what they called heritage policy? They would take that out. And so on paper, it looks like they are being transformative. However, we've had an incident where we had interviewed a principal, and he very proudly said that, I've been here for a good number of years, and at the moment, the intake, about 25 or 75%, I don't know the percentage exactly, but of that intake, he taught their fathers. And I sat there and I thought, well, exactly. So this heritage policy is quite underlying. And I can understand it because, at a lot of these schools, you find that the alumni pump money into the school. You would get a cricket field that's named after some person that kind of gave a lot of money to the school. And so I suppose that's why schools want to keep it. But it goes against trying to be a school that's transformative and a school that is inclusive of everybody.
And I mean, you've just answered my next question as we wrap this up as to why it matters that school admissions work in this way.
Well, first of all, we want our schools to reflect our country. And if you are in a country that is 90% Black, you cannot have a school that is predominantly white. Um, Also, as a parent, when you walk into a school and you don't see diversity, you don't see that the school is transparent in how they administer the admissions policies, you've got to think something is wrong here. And so that's why it is so important for parents to be aware of what the admissions policies are, because very often the first time that parents actually realize this is when they have to apply for their kids to a school. And when do they apply? When the child needs to start grade R. That's too late. The early lock-in starts so much earlier because very often you'd find that schools have pre-primary schools that would be their feeder schools. But parents who necessarily don't live in the area, they're unfamiliar with it. They don't know about it. And so they don't realize that actually they have to start so much earlier to try and get their child in that kind of process or in that trajectory so that their child has a possibility of getting into a good school or a school that they feel would be suitable for their child. And so this for me is just making parents aware, getting the knowledge out there so that they make informed decisions much earlier than what they generally, would have.
And just quickly, Dr. Kruger, before I let you go, when we're talking about the address as well, you know, it became quite a norm in certain lots of parts of the country where if you wanted your child to go to a particular kind of school, but you didn't live in that area, then you perhaps get the address of a family member who lives nearby to use. Is that still happening? And if so, is that even enough? Because there are other layers of this gatekeeping that's happening. So you could have the right address, but it doesn't end there.
Well, first of all, the zoning policy is not administered fairly. You can understand that, a child who, if the school is closest to you, obviously you would want your child to go there because it's easy, to get to the school. However, one thing is for sure, that you cannot tell me that all the kids that go to a particular school all live in the same areas. I'm going to make a basic example. And so, especially in the Western Cape, you have schools in a particular area, and then you've got your affluent areas, which are just outside, and then you've got your least affluent areas, which could be like your Cape Flats, which is just on the one side. Very often, you would find that schools would take students from the more affluent areas, even if it means that they have to travel in. So the zoning policy is not applied evenly, and it's not applied fairly. And that's where the problem is. As far as I've had schools that have said, well, sorry, you've got a flat in the area, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get in. You've got to have a house. I mean, so it changes. You know, the goalpost kind of gets shifted when it comes to zoning. And so that's also where the problem is. It's not cut and dry.
Fascinating study indeed that you have conducted. They really appreciate your time and also unpacking it for us. That was Dr. Samantha Krige from the Cape Peninsula University of Technology.